So, if you're on the path to becoming a US citizen, I want you to think about that oath you're going to take because it's different from almost any other in the world. And to really get why, we've got to go back to the beginning. Back to this really hot, really tense summer in Philadelphia, where a bunch of guys looked around and realized their brand new country was about to fall apart.
See, here's the thing. You're not swearing an oath to some perfect, flawless myth. You're not pledging allegiance to a storybook. You're swearing an oath to an experiment. And it was an experiment built by people who were, yeah, they were brilliant for sure, but they were also flawed. They were scared. They were arguing with each other. And they were brutally honest about one really important thing. And that's really where this whole story kicks off. The first government they tried to set up right after the revolution, it was a disaster. It just wasn't working. So they did something really hard. They stopped pretending everything was okay, and they rolled up their sleeves to build something totally new. All right, so just how bad are we talking? I mean, what kind of crisis does it take to get all these guys in a room together? Let's take a look. Okay, so their first shot at a government was something called the Articles of Confederation. And honestly, the country was completely coming apart at the seams. The central government was so weak, it couldn't really do anything. So you had states acting like their own little separate countries, practically rivals. Imagine the chaos. Trade was a mess, the money was unstable, and the nation was drowning in debt. And then the final alarm bell went off, a rebellion by farmers that showed everyone clear as day just how fragile this whole thing really was. And that's when they started learning this really hard lesson, one that's at the absolute core of the American experiment. Turns out, freedom without any structure, that's just confusion. Independence without any coordination, well, that just makes you vulnerable. They had all this liberty they'd fought for, but without a strong container to hold it all together, it was just spilling over into chaos.
So that's what brings them to Philadelphia. But the very first thing they did was, well, it was controversial, but it was also absolutely essential. They locked the doors, and they nailed the windows shut.
But why? Why all the secrecy? Well, think about it. How can you build something stable when you've got a crowd screaming outside your window? How can you make real tough compromises when you're basically performing for the folks back home? The secrecy, it created a bubble. It created a room where they could be honest, where they could admit, hey, I don't have all the answers. And it let them actually, truly debate and reason with each other without fear. And once they were inside that room, wow, the real fight began. And this wasn't about small details, crossing the T's and dotting the I's. This was a fundamental clash of visions over what this new country should even be.
So right away, two big plans hit the floor. First up, you have the Virginia Plan. This was the big state's idea. They wanted to scrap the old system completely and build a powerful national government where the number of representatives you get is based on your population. Makes sense if you're big, right? But the small states, they were terrified. They fired back with the New Jersey Plan. Their goal? Just tweak the old system, and most importantly, keep representation equal for every single state. They were convinced they were about to be totally swallowed up by the bigger states.
And right there, that's it. That's the core American argument, isn't it? It's a question that was at the heart of the whole convention, and honestly, it's a question we're still wrestling with today. How do you unite everyone without letting the big guys just swallow up the little guys? So you've got these two totally opposite ideas. How on earth do you move forward from that? Well, for a while, they didn't. They were stuck. The whole thing almost fell apart until they stopped fighting for a total win and started to engineer something new, something built on compromise. And this was their first huge breakthrough. It's called the Great Compromise. Here's what they did. They created a legislature with two houses. First, the House of Representatives. There, your representation is based on population. That made the big states happy. But then, they created the Senate. And in the Senate, every single state gets 2 votes, equal power. That protected the small states. It was brilliant. Nobody got everything they wanted, but everybody got enough to keep going.
Okay, next up, they had to invent something that was frankly terrifying to them, a single national leader. I mean, remember, these guys had just fought a whole war to get rid of a king. So the idea of putting that much power in one person's hands, it made them really, really nervous. That's why they designed the presidency with all these built-in limits, what we call checks and balances, specifically to make sure it could never, ever turn into a monarchy.
And that really was the core design challenge, wasn't it? How do you create a president, but not a king? And their answer tells you everything you need to know about how they thought.
See, they weren't trying to find the perfect angelic person for the job. No, they were trying to design an office that could survive an imperfect one. And that, right there, is the absolute genius of the whole system. It's built on a cynical, but let's be honest, a realistic view of human nature. Their starting point was people will abuse power, so let's build for that. They built a machine that was designed to contain that abuse from the get-go. It wasn't about trusting people to be good. It was about having a structure that could handle it when they're not. And finally, you have the third piece, the judiciary, the court system. They basically created an independent referee for the whole game. Now, to keep them out of the political fray, judges are appointed, not elected. That's supposed to protect them from the passions of the moment. But their power is also limited. They can interpret the laws, but they can't write them. And they have to rely on the other two branches to actually enforce their decisions. See, every single piece is designed to be checked and balanced by another. But we have to be really honest here. All this brilliance, this intricate machine they were building, it was being constructed right alongside a profound and terrible injustice. And we have to talk about that. We have to talk about the system's original sin. Because inside that very room, while they were designing a government based on liberty, they were also making deals, making compromises to protect the institution of slavery. And this is a really hard truth that we have to be able to hold in our hands at the same time. The machine they built was innovative. In some ways, it was genius. And at the very same moment, it was stained by a profound sin. Both things are true. And acknowledging that, that's not a weakness. It's an absolute requirement for understanding the country that you are joining. So after 4 long, hot, grueling months, they finally walked out of that room. But they didn't walk out with a victory. They walked out with a proposal, a plan. And now came what was maybe the hardest part of all. They had to go out and convince the rest of the country to actually say yes. And what followed was basically a war of ideas. It was fought in newspapers, in pamphlets, in town squares. And the number one fear people had was, whoa, this new federal government seems way too powerful. The fight got so intense that in the end, a crucial promise had to be made. They said, okay, the very first thing we'll do once this new government is up and running is add a Bill of Rights to protect your individual liberties. And honestly, that promise was the key. It's probably what got the whole thing across the finish line. So what's the big takeaway here for you? I think it's this. America wasn't built by perfect people. It wasn't founded by saints. It was built by practical, often difficult, flawed human beings who were willing to argue and yell and, finally, compromise, just to create a structure. A machine that they hoped would be functional enough to survive our own human weaknesses. It was never meant to be perfect. It was meant to endure. And that is what you are swearing an oath to. Not some sacred, perfect document, but a resilient one. Not a finished product, but an ongoing, living experiment. So that oath, it's not just a ceremony. It's you accepting a responsibility. A responsibility to understand this machine, to participate in it, and to do your part to help it endure.